All right, what up, homies? Welcome to day 2 of New Stuff Distance Learning. So yesterday we got into how to create a 2-proportion z-interval, looking at the difference, estimating the difference in 2 population parameters based on 2 samples of data. So today we kind of want to expand on that, and we want to look at how we can use our 2-proportion z-interval to determine if there's a significant difference in 2 proportions. So let's do it. We've used intervals in the past with our 1 proportion z. We would sometimes use an interval to decide if we thought a parameter was above or below a specific value, right? We've used an interval to test some null hypothesis. And so this is similar. We're now going to use an interval to test some null hypothesis, and we'll make that connection a little stronger with the next video when we start to look at 2 proportion z tests. So for now, let's do it. So if you didn't watch the 2 proportion z interval video, if you're one of my students, you should definitely do that first. But otherwise, here's our context. So yesterday, whatever in the other video, we estimated the difference in proportions of older and younger individuals who snore based on this context. So if this is new to you, pause this bad boy, familiarize yourself with this context. And, you know, that's all. I don't know. It sounded like I was going to say something else, but I got nothing else. So anyways, so in the other video, we did in fact create our 2 proportion z interval. And so we estimated that the true difference in proportions of older and younger individuals who snore is between 3.7% and 18.1%. And we did that. Our 1 was the over 30 group and our 2 was the under 30 group. And the calculator always does 1 minus 2. So we have this order of subtraction. Yesterday, I asked you to think about if we subtracted in the other order, how would that change this interval in the red box here? I'm not going to tell you because you could just flip those 1s and 2s and the 2 prop z in there and see what happens. So now we want to try to decide, based on this interval, do we think there's a significant difference in the proportions of older and younger individuals who snore? Let's find out. So I think the best place to start is going to be to think about what would represent not a significant difference. So let's hop over to the whiteboard here. So we want to consider 2 parameters. 1p, the true percent of people over 30 who snore, and then another p, the true percent of people under 30 who snore. All right, we want to try to decide, is there truly a difference in the percents of older and younger people who snore, right? In our sample there was, right, 37% of the people who were over 30 snored, 26% I think of the people under 30 snored, but hey, maybe that's just sampling variability. We want to know, is this a statistically significant result? So let's start by thinking about if there was no difference in these 2 parameters. If there was no difference in the percent of people over 30 who snore and the percent of people under 30 who snore, what would that tell us about these 2 p's right here? All right, so pause it if you need to, think about it. But yeah, you're right. If there's no difference, that means these 2 p's are the same number. Is my head floating in front of me? So, as we know from yesterday, anytime we're comparing 2 samples in statistics, just like that warm up with the 2 pictures, we want to focus on the differences in those values. So we always want to subtract our p's or p hats or x bars or mu's. And like if we do p over 30 minus p under 30, but there's no difference in the same number, and they're the same number, right? If this is the same number as this, when we subtract, what are we going to get? 0. So that's important. Anytime we're talking about a 2 sample interval, whether 2 prop z, 2 sample t interval, or if we get into a paired t interval, we always want to keep in mind that this 0, when we're talking about differences, 0 represents no difference. A value of 0 represents those 2 parameters were the same thing, or the difference was 0. All right, right? Like in math, going back to elementary school, like the difference is the subtraction answer. So we're literally saying, right, there's no difference. That's the key number. So when we start to examine this interval, we want to try to decide, is it possible that the difference between the two is 0 based on our interval? Let's hop back over here. So what would represent there's not a significant difference? 0. So for our interval, hold on one second. Hold on, wait for it. So I lied. I'm not going in here because I can't write with the mouse. That's ridiculous. So in our interval, whiteboard. Our interval came out to be 3.7%, 18.1%. Do we think that there's a significant difference? Well, if there was no difference, that would mean that 0 would have to be inside our confidence interval, right? Because if 0 is in the interval, then we're saying we think it's possible with some level of confidence that the true difference in the parameters is 0 or there's no difference, right? That's what it means if we had an interval like this, I don't know, -4% and +4%, right? Then we're saying it's possible there's no difference because, right, the true difference could be 0. Is that what's happening here? Based on this interval, do we think it's possible there's no difference? Nah, 0 is not in this interval. So conversely, since 0 is not inside the interval, we don't think it's possible that the true difference is 0. So we don't think it's possible that there's no difference, or in other words, we do think there is in fact a significant difference. And then connecting back to what happened yesterday, since our interval, right, we've got 2 positive numbers, we did over minus under, and this is all connecting back to yesterday. Not only if we kept elaborating, do we think there is a significant difference because 0's not in the interval, right? 0's in interval, no significant difference. 0 not in the interval, there is a significant difference. But beyond that, we think there is a significant difference, and more specifically, we think the percent of people over 30 who snore is greater, because if we do over minus under and we get a positive number, this has to be a larger percentage. Now that's not really part of this question, right? That's just touching back on that idea yesterday. So the key takeaway, you're focusing on 0, and 0 because if there was no difference, when we subtract those 2 p's, we would get 0. So, kind of recap, you can give your screen a little pause here. This is something good to throw down in the notes. 0 represents no difference. 0 is inside the interval. There's not a significant difference. If the interval doesn't contain 0, there is a significant difference. And that's true for any 2 sample interval, as I referenced earlier, those listed below. So for our answer, and you can pause, right, and write that stuff down if you want for some notes, we would say something like this. Based on the interval, there is a significant difference in the percent of older and younger people who snore because 0 is not inside the interval. Like, that's it. You don't need 73 sentences, right? Don't go more is better. No 9 sentences of BS. That's a terrible idea, because then if we write something that's incorrect, right, that's held against us. We can't just write tons of stuff down and see what works. So be concise, to the point. That's it. So there is a significant 0 difference because 0 is not in the interval. See what you think. So here we've got a little practice for you. So take a minute, read this context, give the video a pause, and this is considering some of the stuff that was referenced today, obviously, and what I just touched on with the positives, negatives, but this also connects a little bit back to the other 2 props, the interval video. So give a pause and take a second. What do you think about these purple questions here? Give me a made-up interval. Like you're literally just making up numbers that would suggest a higher percent of women in East Hartford support building a new outlet mall. What would suggest there's a larger percent for men? Unpause. Same deal. Got one more question. So both of those would suggest there is a significant difference. Now make up another interval that suggests there's not a significant difference. Pause. The answers are on the next screen, so really pause it. How'd you do? Hopefully you got all the right answers. That's it. Little bonus for you, little review here. Think about this. Ooh, it's been a long time since we talked about this question, you know, since we haven't had school since March 13th. That was quite the Friday the 13th for us, huh? What does the 95% confidence level mean? It means the same thing it always meant. So if you need to, flip back in your notes, do a little research. You know, there it is. I did it again. I did it again. Try to write an interpretation of the confidence level, not the interval, not that we are 95% confident. What does this level mean? This down here is just at the very bottom here. I'm pointing, but you can't see my hands. This is just our context. That was the original question because, you know, maybe you might steal the wording from the question. Boom. There it is. That's the meaning of our confidence level. That's one way to write it, you know, it doesn't have to be in those exact words, but it's the idea that if we keep taking samples and over again, we know the sample sizes have to be the same, but that messes with the width. If we keep taking same size samples over and over again, getting people who snore, keep making intervals, about 95% of those intervals are going to contain whatever the true difference in proportions of older and younger individuals who snore is. That's it. Your next assignment is going to be a free response. It'll be posted in AP Classroom. It's actually a 2006 free response. I can't remember which number off the top of my head, but part A is constructing, I believe, a 96% confidence interval, and then part B is a significant difference question. So get to it. Have a good day, and I miss you guys.